From the heart of Montana, this is Big Sky, Small World, Carroll College's student podcast.
Big sky, small world, like a mountain high Montana. Took her to the big sky.
Welcome to Backcountry Buzz, a segment where we talk about outdoor sports in and around the gorgeous state of Montana.
Every week, we will talk to a new guest that loves being outside, and they will tell us about their experiences within their outdoor interests. I'm Miranda.
And I'm Patty.
And we hope you enjoy.
So we have Brad Maddock on our podcast today. He is
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. If you want to introduce yourself, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Brad Maddock. I'm the director of campus recreation here at Carroll College.
Brad is a legend. Brad has done everything under the sun when it comes to outdoor sports, and it's a pleasure to have him on. So yeah, I wanted to interview him and see what his takes are on some outdoor sports.
So I think part of my intro is to kind of talk about what I like to do in the outdoors. And I, Patty kind of said it. I like to do just about everything. I really started getting into a lot of outdoor pursuits, growing up as a kid and especially in my later years of high school. And then when I got to college, I'm an alumni of Carroll, graduated in 2012. And while I was here at Carroll, I really got into a lot of my passions that I do now, like rock climbing, mountain biking, etc. So, I like to do just about everything.
Did you grow up in Montana?
No, I grew up in Denver, Colorado, or the suburbs of Denver.
Very nice. Yeah, it's a good place to be. This is like completely off topic, but there's a picture in the camp room. And every time I look at it, is that you on the right? Like, there's a picture of like.
No, so that this is the picture of a bunch of people on a backpacking trip. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one of the first camp freshman backpacking trips, and that one happened the year before I got to Carroll. So camp started in about 2007.
Okay.
And that was the 2007 camp freshman backpacking trip.
So what would you say has changed the most in the mountaineering program since you were here?
Quite a bit. So when I started out at Carroll, and when the program started, it just started as a student club. So there was really not a lot of staff oversight over the program, and not a lot of training of leaders or anything like that going into it. It was really just a group of like-minded students that would kind of get out and go do stuff with each other, and then invite other Carroll students along. So since then, the program had grown to the point that there was a lot of student participation, and the college was like, we need more oversight on this program. Make sure students are staying safe out there was kind of the main concern. So looking at that, they decided to hire somebody to look over that program, and they wrapped it into the student activities department at that time. And they also created, instead of the program being a club, they made it a program, which gets better funding than a club does. So when I started out at Carroll, I was the assistant director of student activities, but one of the biggest parts of my role was to oversee the camp program. Since then, I've grown it to where it's at now. I've been working at Carroll for 10 years, and then my role has also changed. I'm no longer the assistant director of student activities, and I've moved into a director role as the director of campus recreation, where not only do I oversee the camp program, but also the whole Hunt House and Activity Center, intramural sports, group fitness, the climbing center, etc.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's all fun though.
Is there anything that you're hoping to do in the next few years, I guess, and like what do you see as the future of the mountaineering program?
Always looking to keep an open mind in different directions we can go. And I think that's one of the, it's one of the sad parts, but also the value of getting new students in. I only see, students for, 4 years max. And some students, when they become camp leaders later or get involved in the program later, I only see them for 2 years and then they leave and graduate, which is great. That's what we're, here for. But it always getting new students in with new passions, new ideas for the program. And I really like to focus in on what those students are looking for and the new kind of direction to bring camp, whether it's a different way that we do events or just different events that we're putting on. For example, this year, we've started to move into avalanche education and kind of backcountry skiing a little bit. That's a need that a lot of students, are wanting to get into. And, we want to make sure that we're preparing them to go outside and be safe in the backcountry and, not get caught in avalanches and stay out of avalanche terrain. So that's something we haven't done in the past and a kind of new area that we're moving into.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Like get that as a part of campus, like the backcountry aspect and the downhill skiing would be really cool to add. So, but yeah, we just want to ask you like some more things that are like more personal. Like just because you're inspiration to a lot of us in the camp program and just overall at Carroll when it comes to outdoor sports. Like, what is your favorite adventure that you would say in the past like times that you've been outdoors and done some stuff?
Sure. So I think talking about the different things that I do and one of my favorite adventures, I think it does actually bring me to pack rafting because it seems to bring together a lot of different skills of different outdoor disciplines kind of all together into one. Generally pack rafting trips are multi-day, so you have to have the ability to plan, look at maps and put together a longer trip. You have to have paddling skills to be able to kind of, get through the water and especially the whitewater sections. You have to know how to backpack because that's a crucial part of pack rafting. And so it just kind of culminates everything into one, and it just makes for really fun, interesting adventures. You have to think on your toes, anytime you're in the backcountry on multi-day trips, and things never go perfect, so you always have to be thinking about, what do we do now? How do we move forward?
That's really cool. So maybe explain to us and maybe other listeners like what exactly like is pack rafting. I did like a little bit of research, but
interest.
Yes, niche is a word we use a lot on here. But yeah, maybe just explain like what goes into it and like what you would do during a pack rafting trip.
Yeah, sure. So pack rafting is a sport it's been around for a little while now. I think it kind of really started to get popular in like the 2010s, I would say, is really when it started to kind of come to the forefront of popularity. And basically it's taking inflatable kayaks, but shrinking them down, making them out of really lightweight fabric, and making them so you can bring them with you on a backpacking trip. So these little rafts they're one-person crafts, although you can get tandem ones as well, but generally one person, and they're about the size of a tent and weigh, 10 pounds roughly. And so you roll it up just like a tent. It's just an extra thing to have on your backpack, and then you got to bring your paddle, your life jacket, et cetera, to go with it. And then the idea is that you hike, over these mountains and into the headwaters of all of these big rivers, and you can float down through these kind of smaller creeks in these wilderness areas that don't see many descents at all. And yeah, just kind of a different way to explore the backcountry. You're hiking, up and over the mountain passes, and then you get to the headwaters and walk down to a place where there's enough water, and then you get to float through, these drainages and experience that in a different way. And definitely in areas where a lot of times hikers never see, or anybody else never sees for that matter.
I have two logistical questions.
Yeah.
My first one is is how do you keep all of your stuff dry? Like, how do you ensure that you're not gonna? I mean, that kind of will.
Great question. Yeah, so pack rafts have evolved over the years. And when they first started out, basically what you would do is you would take a dry bag, just a roll top dry bag, and you would put all of your stuff inside of that and then inside of your backpack. And then you would just strap that onto the front of your boat. So your backpack itself would get soaking wet. But all of your contents, your clothes, your sleeping bag, food, whatever, would be inside the roll top dry bag and be dry. So when you got to camp, you would maybe have to dry out your backpack itself, but everything else would be dry. Then pack rafts have evolved, and now they have these things. The kind of name brand is Tie Zip, but it's a zipper that opens up your pack raft, and you can put all of your belongings inside your boat. And then you zip the zipper up and then you blow it up. So all of your stuff is inside in the air chambers of your pack raft. It's awesome because everything stays nice and dry in there. It actually keeps a lot of the weight of your boat low. So it actually prevents you from flipping over in some cases because you have a really low center of gravity. The only negative is if you need something in the middle of the day, you have to deflate your entire boat, open up the zipper, and get it out. So you kind of got to think ahead in the morning. Like, I pull out my lunch. I think about what I need, and I keep that in like a little small dry bag, just handy on my boat, so I don't hopefully have to do that.
That's great. Like, I didn't even think about like that, like it being inside the boat. That's wild that works like that. And, like, it stays buoyant even with you don't have like much heavy stuff. It's probably all like ultralight, but it's like it doesn't weigh it down at all. Like there's no.
I mean, it weighs it down, but I think in the same way that it would be if it was on top of your boat as well. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not a pro in physics and buoyancy, but it seems to be just fine.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. When you said pack rafting the first time, I was like, this doesn't sound very fun. As like you explaining more, I'm like, yeah, like this is something like I would really like to do. I think, yeah, like I've never heard about this besides like when you said to me, yeah, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. In Montana, actually, in particular, we're in a really unique and kind of like hotspot hub for pack rafting. It's like Alaska and Montana and New Zealand are like kind of like the three spots where this sport really kind of took off. And in Montana, we have lots of water, lots of rivers, and a lot of the river basins are really big and wide, and pretty high volume. You think about like Colorado. I know you also grew up there, Patty. And like a lot of like the rivers and creeks in the mountains of Colorado are steep. They're super rugged. They're narrow, and you would probably never be able to get any sort of watercraft down them. Or in Montana, it's totally different. We have these big, wide, beautiful rivers that you can do this in the backcountry.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, it's crazy that Montana's in that group of like that elite like outdoor status of like Alaska and New Zealand as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How long is a typical trip?
You can do day trips with pack rafts. I'll do a trip over on the North Fork of the Blackfoot that's not far away from here, maybe an hour and a half drive. And where we were hiking 3 to 5 miles and we're floating back to our cars the same distance. And these crafts are really nice for that, just to do those little quick trips. But generally speaking, when you're going and trying to float these really remote rivers in these wilderness areas, I think a minimum of 3 days, and you can go for as long as you want, of course. But I think a lot of the trips that I did one last summer that was a 6-day trip.
That's long.
Yeah.
How did you hear about this sport?
I think there was a magazine article. I mean, this was before, like social media and influencers and stuff like started posting, all their cool photos of things. I still do love reading good magazine articles about different outdoor adventures and whatnot. And I think I remember reading one in particular about the first packrafting trip that I ever did, which was in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, not far from here. on the South Fork of the Flathead. And it's a great entry level trip because there's really not a lot of whitewater, if any, on the trip. So you don't have to have a ton of paddling experience. And I read the article and shared it with my buddies, and everybody's like, we need to do that. Like, yeah. So we put the trip together, and it was one of the more memorable adventures that I've ever had. We had a really hard day getting in the first day. We brought way too much stuff. We got super excited about putting our boats in the water way too early. We were like, well, I think the article we were reading, they put their boats in, down further, but it looks like there's plenty of water here. So let's do it, and immediately, there's like logs, across the creek, and we're portaging like 10 times. It's just like, 2 hours to go like 1 mile that could have taken us 15 minutes to walk, So yeah. And then, the adventure just kind of got, we had really fun days. And then there was like things that would happen. I had a friend who she had her bear spray in the front of her pack raft, and she accidentally kicked it with her foot, and it sprayed her in the face, like in the middle of the trip, and we had to deal with that. And then lots of little tiny stories in there, but it was an awesome trip.
Yeah, it's like wild to think about, like, because I've never thought about the ports like pre like phones and pre like all trails. Like, how do you even figure out like what to do? Like is this something you just hear word of mouth? Like some guys like, hey, like Bob Marshall is like a really good place. Like you just get like tips, or is it just the magazines and stuff? Or
yeah, so magazines was huge, word of mouth was huge, and just kind of knowing people and hearing about cool stuff. And then so during this time period, blogging was really big. So a lot of people would blog about their trips and whatnot, and blogs were huge. I think blogs have kind of gotten lost a little bit over the years. But outside of that, it was a really fun time. And, I wish we could go back to it, because not only did you have to, talk to people and whatnot and hear about it, but you also had the opportunity, or more of an opportunity, to create and think of these adventures on your own. We had a very little bit of information from this magazine article. It was more of a story, not a information article on, where they park their cars, where they, all this stuff. So we had to sit down and look at the maps and figure it out for ourselves and kind of make our own adventure.
yeah, it's like that doesn't really happen today. Usually you like go in and it's like, oh, like this is where you park, this is where you like have to go, and this is a picture where you turn. Yeah. So
yeah. And I think, it obviously it's great to have all that information. I do a lot of trips where, I'm pulling tons of information from past trips and whatnot, and marking it on my maps that are on my phone, and, exactly where to turn and all that kind of stuff. And it's really convenient and definitely saves a lot of trouble. But, it's fun to have an adventure, that you just create for yourself, and, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but it's an adventure, and you always come away with a good story.
Is pack rafting something that would be difficult to get into, or is it relatively easy? Because I think it's sounding like, at least equipment-wise, it's not something that you necessarily could just throw yourself into right away. But
sure,
if someone was already had some knowledge and experience backpacking, is that something like that would be?
Totally. That's a really, really good base to have. And that's kind of like the core component of pack rafting. It's like you have to know how to backpack and be really comfortable doing that. If you feel great backpacking, then you're just adding in this extra component. I mean, one, there's a cost component to it, and that's my least favorite thing about a lot of, outdoor sports is, there's a price of entry, but outside of that, you're adding weight to your pack, so definitely like fitness becomes, something you need a little bit extra fitness, to get yourself there, or just prepare to hike slower, because you have an extra 10 pounds on you that you wouldn't have had if you were just backpacking. And then, yeah, I think, depending on the trip and the river and whatnot, you do need a little bit of kayaking and paddling experience, to be safe and know what to do in an emergency on the water. So I wouldn't say it's, crazy to get into by any means, but, just like everything, it's important to have knowledge to be safe out there.
Yeah. It's like it's a good point. It's kind of, you have to like throw yourself into those things too. Like you mentioned before, it's like when you were just starting off with this, you kind of throw yourself in and just be brave a little bit and try and fail sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, yeah. One other thing we like to ask people we have on is who do you look up to most in the outdoors world? Like someone that's taught you, someone that was like a mentor, or someone that you've like heard about?
Yeah, let's see. Well, initially kind of going back to, like one of my first mentors in the outdoor sports world was my high school science teacher. Ran a small outdoors club at our high school. And he was the one that really took the time to take me out and, a couple others at our school and get us into, a lot of the things that I do now, particularly rock climbing, backcountry skiing, and mountain biking were the things that I did with him. And that really kickstarted and got me a really good base for the outdoors. And I still am friends with him to this day and will connect every once in a while. He came up here 2 summers ago and visited, which was pretty fun. And then, outside of that, speaking of pack rafting, there's this guy out here. His name is Luke Mell. And he does a lot in the pack rafting world, particularly in kind of like the safety realm for the sport, and just making sure that people have, knowledge going on these adventures. And then he's also really into wild ice skating, which is something that I've picked up the past, handful of years. I grew up playing ice hockey, so I had a really good skating background, and Helena, Montana is like a mecca outside of Alaska. Like, I'm serious, for wild ice skating. It's incredible. And I've just become so addicted. I mean, you can skate miles and miles and miles on the lakes, and like you can travel from Helena to Townsend on ice skates.
It's not dangerous? Like I feel like
No, it's dangerous. Just like anything, I mean, it's like you just have to have the knowledge to make it safe, mitigate the hazards, just like rock climbing. Rock climbing is dangerous to somebody that, first thinks about it. But, once you're comfortable with the equipment, how to use the ropes and mitigate the risk, it's not so dangerous anymore, So it's the same with wild ice skating. So yeah, I mean, if you're not smart about it and you're not reading the ice, you can fall through and be really cold.
Yes. I can't
So
imagine.
he's another one that, I kind of follow and really enjoy a lot of his kind of content and whatnot.
I have one last question. So I know you bring your young kids on a lot of your, not all of them, but a lot of your more beginner friendly adventures. So I'm kind of wondering what that's been like, getting to teach them about the outdoors and how to be safe in them and get to share that with them. And I know your wife is also pretty avid in a lot of your interests. So I'm just wondering about what it's been like to like get to share that with your family.
Yeah. It's been awesome. We try and, spend as much time outdoors with our kids as we can, kind of sharing, our passions and whatnot. And it's all for us. It's all about just kind of like getting them exposed to the different outdoor disciplines that are out there, but not trying to push it and make them, push them over the edge where they're scared or they don't like to do it, because, our goal is hopefully that when they grow, older and become more capable, they'll want to go on some big adventures, maybe a pack rafting adventure or something like that with us, So just kind of giving them the base and making it fun. There's lots of gummy bears and high fives. And as soon as, a kid turns and starts to, cry or look like they're not having fun, we just kind of like pull back and, play a game of hide and seek or who knows what.
Well, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
We gotta do part 2 sometime.
Honestly, there's a lot
Next
more.
sport.
a lot more pack rafting to be had.
We can talk about all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
We just started talking about wild ice
Expert on-
skating.
I know, you should drop that one in there for next time.
We should do a rock climbing one. I can interview you guys, and you guys can tell me more about rock climbing. And and
Absolutely.
educate our listeners. Thank you for listening to Backcountry Buzz on the Big Sky Small World podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Took her to the big sky.
Big Sky Small World is sponsored by the Carroll College Communication Center.
Helping the Carroll and Helena communities with presentations, multimedia, and podcasting since 2020.
Find us in the library or email Director Alan Hansen at ahansen@carroll.edu.
Took her to the big sky.
All aboard, choo choo. Today we got quite a story to tell you all, you listeners of Big Sky Small World. This is the train station workshop, where as a newly hired conductor, I will be guiding a non-stop run through the numerous topics my mind seems to think is so important to fixate on. Today we have our first passenger, who will be introduced. But first, let me glaze up my main man as if he is a devious donut from Krispy Kreme, so that everyone can denote the power difference between us. What could I possibly say about this man that isn't already ingrained in scripture upon the solid molten core within every red dwarf star in our system? What testimony could I give about someone whose deeds of life make up the constellations that future humans will regularly use to guide themselves as they journey across infinite space to new frontiers? I guess one way I could even begin to describe him is to mention that he is an extinguished scholar with a neuroscience degree, a renowned athlete of swimming in Northgate, Seattle, the deadliest three-point shooter to ever exist in pickup basketball at the YMCA in UW, and the author of a book that is already being rumored to have an extended contract for a 50-book series, and the future winner of the Nobel Prize for the next 3 decades. Without further ado, please let me introduce my good friend, Henry Tan.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. That was some absolute, what an intro.
Did you like my introduction? Was it adequate enough for you as a distinguished scholar such as you are?
One word would be excessive, but yeah, it was a good one.
Excessive, interesting. Did I miss anything? Should I maybe go back to the notepad?
No, I think we're good.
I think you're good. Okay. So, Henry, we have both traveled the world a lot. Would you say that is a correct assumption?
Maybe more than people did 50 years ago.
So I guess that qualifies us as people of culture. Is that a correct assumption?
Depends on your perspective, I think.
Very politician of you to answer in such a way. Are you hoping to run for office?
Not anytime soon, no.
All right. So let's talk about this then. I've been to, name a few, Mexico, Canada, Japan, Abu Dhabi Airport, Egypt, the UK briefly in the airport, and that's about it for me. What do we got going on your
Oh,
side?
wow. Yeah, I mean, if you asked me maybe just a year ago, I would have told you I've only been to parts of East Asia, like China. I've been to Hong Kong. I'd been to kind of Thailand, near Thailand, and then Canada outside of the States where I'm from. So really not a lot of places. But up until recently, I had this huge trip where I'd started out in Hungary in a city called Budapest, and then I went to Newcastle, so England, and then I'd been to Scotland. I went to Italy. I went to specifically Naples, and then the Amalfi Coast, then the island of Capri, and then I went back to Newcastle, then to London. Yeah, I think I went to France after that. I went to Portugal. So I was a really disorganized sprawl, but those are the handful of places I went to quite recently.
Wow. Okay. You have me beat out of the water.
Actually,
I guess I am a
forgot
poor
Istanbul
peasant.
in Turkey.
Oh, yeah. I was about to say, didn't you go to Turkey?
Yeah, I went to Turkey.
Yeah. So you're telling me you went to Scotland the UK, but you forgot about the most important island in the whole entire world, Ireland.
I haven't been to Ireland, bro.
All right, I
I
guess
wish I
that's a
did
boys'
though.
trip. Boys' trip
Yeah,
coming
yeah, yeah.
soon. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's how the boys' trip's gonna work. We go there, we go to the pubs, we get drunk, and then that's it. Go home.
Okay. Okay.
Or you can play catch the local sheep because there's a lot of sheep in Ireland.
Oh yeah,
To the
there
listeners, I am Irish, very much so. So I think it's okay if I say that. So you were in Turkey. What was that like? Was that a culture shock compared to our American society, I would say?
Yeah, yeah, so Turkey, I stayed in Istanbul in a neighborhood called Sultanahmet. I believe that's kind of where and the king essentially the Sultan used to live. Istanbul is a really interesting city. Obviously, I can't say I've been to all of Turkey, but Istanbul is really interesting because it's a city in a country that straddles kind of Europe and Asia. So you end up with the city that has kind of both of those influences. There's an Asian side and a European side. They are quite known for having these very beautiful mosques, actually. I think it's interesting because I think Turkey as a whole, or maybe specifically Istanbul, some 99% of people are identify as Muslim, but they're, I mean, most of their society is quite secular. I mean, there's these mosques that kind of really define the kind of cityscape in a sense. They're everywhere. They have these great big domes and very tapering kind of sharp pillars that are very distinctive. So they have all these really beautiful mosques, and then they also have like these grand bazaars where goods are sold, spice, all kinds of goods are sold. As far as like how it compares to what I'm used to, so I'm from Seattle, Washington. So I mean, yeah, I would say the mosques are the primarily the distinguishing factor, but also that I think culturally they have some notable differences just because of so many are Muslim. Essentially, in the evenings, there's I forget the specific name, but these sort of calls. It's like a sort of evening prayer that you can hear from these huge microphones all over the place. So it's kind of like a wailing almost. Pretty interesting. I forget I really should know this, but I forgot the name of it. But I thought that was pretty very, very interesting. Culturally, I think they're very hospitable. Most of the people I met there were extremely kind, have Chinese origins essentially, but a lot of them thought I was Japanese for whatever reason, so they tried speaking to me in Japanese, which is pretty funny. Um,
And for the viewers listening, we also have a Japanese friend who gets mistaken for being Chinese when he travels, so it's kind of an ongoing joke. But
yeah.
so yeah, I know what you mean. When I was in Egypt, it's definitely a different environment there. I was about there for about a month and a half, and
hmm
in America, and I think this is safe to assume, everyday life does not really surround faith. Maybe you have specific days of the week that are solely dedicated to one's faith, but when I was in Egypt, the environment was all about Allah, their God. And they prayed 5 times a day, and you could hear it every day, no matter where you were in the highest apartment or on the street level, and very passionate about their faith. In a region that is Istanbul, which was, as you mentioned, the empire of the Ottomans and the sultans. It was the epicenter of the world after the fall of Constantinople. Everything was through the Ottoman Empire. And as faith was a predominantly important there, it was important to be close to the relationship of gods, to submit to
yeah.
Allah. But yeah, that was, as you were saying, were you there for work or was that pleasure in your work trip?
Yeah, so I was kind of in between places on the work trip. So it was purely just because, I found a pretty cool flight, a pretty cheap flight, I mean, and stayed there for about like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, I really like the food there. I mean, it seems quite simple, but they have a lot of, I mean, what you expect from kind of Mediterranean kind of cuisine is like kebabs, like some meat, and then separately just some kind of salad. It felt very balanced. It was quite simple, but also very good. Tea culture, like cafe culture, is a huge thing there. Just finding some cafe to hunker down in, and really, yeah, just like take your time and drink tea, which is pretty cool. So
Now, they don't allow alcohol there, right? Is that,
no, yeah, yeah, it's just yeah.
it was the
I
same
mean,
for me.
not that I know of, yeah. Okay.
That could not sell alcohol, at least in Egypt. The only way you could get alcohol is if you were visiting Egypt and you had an American passport. You had to show them your American passport, which had the amount
Oh,
of
wow.
days you were listed to be staying in Egypt. And from
Yeah.
there, you're allowed to purchase 1 to 2 bottles of alcohol. And even then, these are not like name brands we have in America and the rest of the world. This was off brand, very low in alcohol purity, because again, it's outlawed in the Quran. You're not allowed to drink alcohol.
Yeah.
That's one of the main points from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, I think in Istanbul you could get it. It's I didn't really see, I guess when I went out to eat and stuff like that, I didn't see a lot of people indulging, but it was certainly available, which is why it's interesting because they predominantly Muslim, but society is quite secular, so kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was also available in Egypt, but there was kind of a limit, maybe like 1 to 2 beers. And these
Oh,
weren't like
wow.
in a big beer bottle. These were in like a tiny, skinny, long cup. But
Hmm.
yeah, when I was
Yeah,
in
interesting.
Egypt, which was interesting when you were talking about the call to prayer, that brought back vivid memories because the mosques, they don't operate on the same audio system, if that makes sense. So each mosque has their own speaker and their own singer. So when the call to prayer does happen, it's all from different people singing at different frequencies. Some people are really good singers, some people are really bad singers. So it's kind of a barrage of
Yeah.
singing. But the
Hmm.
worst probably for me was maybe it was like at 5 in the morning and I'm jet lagged and then I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? But
You're just like, shut up. Okay.
no, I couldn't do that, bro. I'll tell you this, when I was driving through the streets of Egypt, they had military checkpoints at every corner. And I mean, not like, oh, it's just a police officer staying there. I'm talking about police officers in full tactical gear with like MP5s. They had a tank behind them.
Oh,
So it
yeah.
was, it
Yeah.
was pretty interesting, I would say that. And it was definitely, you know, I'm not saying I didn't feel welcome there. I definitely did. The people were
Yeah.
very nice to me. But considering the history of America and the region of the Middle East, you kind of have to be aware that a lot of the
Yeah,
problems that
or
are from there did occur because of actions of our government. Whether you think that is right or you think that is wrong, that's kind of just how the sentiment is, at least where I was.
hmm
And kind of like the same experience I had in Japan is when everyone would look at me, I was kind of like, not as a foreigner, but like no one's seen kind of a white American before.
Yeah.
I mean, people would stare at me and they would like try to come up to me and shake my hand. And I remember one time I visited the pyramids of Giza, and I was riding a camel because that's what you do. So I'm riding the camel, and this one guy is like, "Oh, the great conqueror! Please bestow me with gifts." And then I gave him a little like a political shake, wave my hand, and like I bestow upon you the gift of humility.
Ooh, that's a good one right there. I noticed the same thing though. Like, so I stayed in Sultanahmet in Istanbul, and it's really close to kind of the big Grand Bazaar and then really notable mosque called the Blue Mosque and then the Hagia Sophia. And there was security, like I guess police or military there packing some pretty heavy heat. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I went about 2 years ago, maybe, and you just went this past year. So maybe
Uh,
would
yeah, it would have been in I think September,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of 2024. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Egypt wasn't safe. I felt safe the entire time in Egypt. It's just
Mhm.
notably different to walking the streets in America in like a city like Seattle, and maybe you see police cars, but you don't really see military per se. And so you're
Yeah.
kind of like, whoa. And then I remember one time, and this is a vivid memory. We were driving down the street, and I look over, and there's just maybe blocks and blocks of just a single straight wall. And I asked our driver, his name was Murad. I asked, hey, Murad, what is that building over there? Because it was just probably about 7 blocks long of just a straight wall. No streets went through it. He's like, oh, that's the local prison. And I
Oh.
said, whoa. He said, yeah, we house every prisoner that is not considered a terrorist or a murderer is housed in that prison. Men and women, but women, they're warded off, which is very different because in America, we have many prisons, but they're spread out. This was just one ginormous prison. And like getting
Huh.
into the prison, you would have thought you were trying to get into the White House. They had search dogs, they had metal detectors, people were getting patted down. It was insane to say the least. But that's is just a small divot in my trip to Egypt. I mean, the trip was wonderful. I mean, we went to the Nile, we went to Luxor in the Valley of the Kings. And I don't know if I told you this, but I actually went to Mount Sinai, which was,
Oh,
as you
really?
know, the mountain of Moses where he received the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So we fly into the area that we fly into. I don't recall the name. And we go to our hotel and we get there and we have to be ready to leave by 10 p.m. So my uncle at the time decides to take a nap. I don't for whatever reason. I'm like, I'm not going to take a nap. I don't need to sleep. So he wakes up at 10 p.m. We get on a bus and we stop at this gas station out in the middle of the desert. And it's kind of like at a crossroads. And there's a bunch of other buses already there. And the next thing you know, we get a military escort through the desert, the rest of the desert, because
Holy hell. Yeah.
the way we were heading was considered a no man's land. There's raiders that live there. It's very dangerous, apparently. So we had like a military combo in front of us and behind us, and our bus was in the middle. So if something happened, we would see it either happen in front of us or behind us, and we could maybe know what to do. But then, I mean, you're in the middle of the desert. And if the military is no longer capable of protecting you, what good do you have?
Holy hell.
So we arrive at Mount Sinai at around 12 p.m., pitch black. And so we have to go through this metal detector. And I'm not sure, I don't know why. Maybe it's just, again, protection of the people because it's a big tourist spot. And we start climbing, and it's pitch black. I mean, there's no lights there. There's nothing. You can maybe look at the stars, but even then, those are not that bright. So people bring their flashlights and they look at the ground. And so we're hiking. We're about maybe 45 minutes in, and then we see some people in camels roll up behind us. And these were people that paid for a camel ride to get to the stairs because they didn't want to climb the hike. They just wanted to do the stairs part. And these people, let's just say they like to, they were a little bit bigger.
Poor camels, man.
Yeah, poor camels. But I was just like, oh. And so keep this in mind. It's probably about 2 p.m. We get all the way up to around the 550 stairs. And those are 550 stone stairs placed up into the mountain to the very peak. And you're not allowed to summit until maybe like 10 minutes before first light because it snows up there. In Egypt, it snows on that mountain and it gets frozen over. And people have died falling on those stairs because it's not like you have a handrail to carry yourself up. No, it is uneven steps that some are really big, some are really small. And it's just straight vertical. So we camp out in this little tent with a bunch of, they have a bunch of rugs. And of course, you know, when you get up there, you're all sweaty and then you instantly cool down. It's probably about 14 degrees on the top where we were. So I start getting hypothermia and I start shaking and I have to pay like $5 for some hot cocoa and 2 extra blankets just to keep warm. I mean, I was like freezing. And then we get up there and we climb the 550 steps, still pitch black, mind you. Easily could have fallen. We get up there, we watch the sunrise, and it was magnificent. Because again, you're climbing in the middle of the night, so you don't get to see the landscape. When the sun rises, we see what we are on top of this mountain, this huge valley. You can see little villages at the very bottom, and they look like tiny wooden huts. I mean, that's how small they looked up there. And you could see all the way to the Red Sea. I have a couple pictures. Of course, I'm not smiling in them because I was not very happy at that point. But it was pretty surreal, I would say. And then walking down, you're walking down and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I did all this. Because you don't see how far you go. You just one step at a time looking at the ground. And now you're walking down.
In the dark,
You're like, I just hiked like 7-8 miles without even knowing it. And it is vast. And it's like, it's switchback straight up the mountain and then stairs like you're climbing a ladder. That's how steep these stairs were. And you're going down these stairs. And of course, the sun's out. It's like about 6 degrees now. It's like 6 in the morning. So you're already getting warm. And you're like, oh my God, these stairs are crazy. I could have just fallen right there. No one would have known for at least 2 weeks. I would have been dead. So it's pretty.
That's crazy.
But I would just say it was surreal. It was. And I think that's like one of my top 2 moments in Egypt. The top 3 was I was allowed to stand on the pyramid. You're not allowed to, but this Egyptian ministry guide, who we don't really know if he was a guide, he kind of just adopted us. And of course, you have to pay him later because he took us on this whole journey and got us the camels and got us the papaya paper, which I got your name written on and I gave to you. So he helped us hook us up with all that. He's like, here, climb on top of this pyramid. So I climbed 4 or 5 steps. We take some pictures, and I look pretty cool, like I'm J. Cole from his first album. But the next thing I know, bro, there's like a line of 50 plus people waiting up to climb where I was. So I'm like,
Oh,
I
wow.
got to get out of here because, I don't want to get in trouble. Because there's like, I took a picture of a sign, and the sign said, no climbing on the pyramid. And then the next picture
Yeah.
was me on top of it. But the top one moment was I went on a boat cruise in the Red Sea, which,
Oh, yeah, it was parted.
right across the water is Jordan and Syria. And we're on a
Mhm.
boat cruise and we visit a bunch of coral reefs. And then here I am standing on a sandbar in the middle of the Red Sea. And I have this guy who doesn't speak English. I was the only American on this tiny little boat cruise, no one else. So I was kind of alone listening to my headphones. I had him take a picture of me in the water, standing on the Red Sea in the middle of the ocean. Like you could see around me, like miles around me was just ocean. There was no way it
Yo,
would have
I'm
been possible.
I'm
But
gonna need that picture, bro.
it was a
That's tough.
sandbar, and that was probably the coolest moment ever, because
Hmm.
who would expect a sandbar to be in the middle of the Red Sea?
Yeah,
Enough about
that's
me.
incredible.
Let's talk about your trip. I
No,
want
that
to
was
hear
yeah.
your top experience out of all the trips you ever had. What was your top one?
That's a really tough question. I mean, obviously, I had a little bit of a different experience compared to you because most of my trips were kind of work related. Dude, I can't come up with the top. You're gonna have to.
All right,
I need.
let me set the ball a little bit. I kind of dunked on you right there with this amazing
I could give
story.
you a top in different places that I've been.
But let
But I
me
don't know.
lower the rim. Let me talk about my trip to Japan.
Uh-huh.
I was a foreign exchange student. I got to visit the schools. Of course, I was young in high school. Again, I thought, you know what? I'm not falling asleep on this plane ride. I'm going to stay awake the whole time. So
Mhm.
by the time I get on the bullet trains, I'm passing out with my luggage. And of course, Japanese culture in regards to bullet trains is there's certain sections on the train where you cannot speak. It is considered rude and dishonorable to speak out loud in these. So, of course, I was aware of that at the time, but I was so tired. I didn't know that was a section we were on the bullet train. So I was sleeping, and I'm sleeping in my chair with my bag, my rolling bag tucked beneath my legs, like I'm holding it together, and I would fall asleep, and then my bag would roll all the way to the end of the train, and then I would have to go and pick it up. And I would tell you this, my sensei got so mad at me, but I was so tired, I couldn't stop it. It happened like 6 times. And I think that's when I got sick because, as Henry knows, I caught influenza when I was there. And I almost died. I had to be rushed to the
Yeah.
hospital. I had to get on an IV, get a blood. So I missed all the cool trips, right? I couldn't go to the temples. I couldn't go to the forests. I couldn't do any of that stuff. But I got so
You did a trip to the
sick.
hospital
Yeah,
instead.
yeah, I got to a trip to like it was a tent hospital. So I was like, "What am I? Where am I right now?" But it's so
That's
funny
hilarious.
because I was sleeping in my room and I was in a very traditional Japanese home, like historically traditional. They had a garden out front, right near a forest, and I had this vivid nightmare of like a long black voidless demon walking out of the forest and taking me away. But dude, I was delirious. I thought I was gonna die. I think it's important to note that the first time I showed up there, I met the mom, the son, and the boss, the obasan, the grandma. She was in her room watching John Wick, and I knew right away. Oh yeah, she is my favorite. Because I'm like, oh, are
Yeah.
you watching John Wick, Keanu Reeves? She's like, yes, Keanu Reeves. So I sat down. I probably watched it for 10 minutes, and it was a good one. It was like when John Wick, the first one, first came out. So like, it was a culture phenomenon. You know,
Yeah.
man got his car stolen and his dog killed. He was very upset. So
Yeah.
the problem was her room was right underneath the wooden stairs, and those stairs are not like the traditional American stairs, right? So they're I don't know how to explain it. They're maybe a little bit uneven. I mean, this is a very old house, so every time I had to go down the stairs to use the bathroom, I would always fall. So I'd fall down 6 or 7 stairs, and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad because the grandma's probably thinking I'm dying. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my god, he just
Oh,
broke his
yeah.
ankle. So I really feel bad for that family because they're really nice to me, and I got sick on their watch, and I had to go to the hospital, and I know that's not really what they were prepared for at all. So
You're like this poor American.
I did go to a castle. That was pretty cool.
Ooh,
Yeah, I had to duck
yeah,
my heads a lot because I was pretty tall at that point. And it's
yeah.
funny, like I went to the castle and then I went to the going away party, and even then I was still pretty sick. Like I was recovering, but I was very weak. And one of the hosts on the Japanese side, because he hosts American students, right? I think he
Mhm.
was the mayor of the town we were staying in. He was dressed
Oh
up in
wow.
his gi and he had a black belt on, and he had me come forward and break a couple of wooden boards. I still have them to this day. They're not framed, but they're in a basket. And then there's a couple of photos of me, and now I can say I broken boards in Japan while deathly sick. Now it's your turn.
That's fire.
I don't know. So I guess the two trips are I got really sick in Japan and had to go to the hospital, and then I got hypothermia on top of Mount Sinai. So
Holy hell. Yeah, all near-death experiences, which is quite interesting.
yeah, don't go on a trip with me, or maybe do, and the bad luck happens to me, and you have a good time. So it's a toss of the corn right there.
Yeah. Oh my God, dude, it's snowing outside right now.
Nice.
Anyways, yeah, I realized I haven't talked to you at all about this trip. So, wait, do you know how much can like? Do you know how many people will be able to listen to this?
Well, maybe 6. My mom says she's
Okay.
going to, so that's probably 7. Not a lot of people.
Okay, so I can say some stuff.
Well, if you're going to be a politician, don't say anything at all. Defer, defer, defer.
Well, so the UK has these quite really good infrastructure for kind of like developing brain tissue banks. So that justified what we are doing justified going over there. So the kind of cool moment I would say for me in Budapest was there was this big conference, right? And the architecture there is really phenomenal. I mean, I never really hear of people going to Hungary or Budapest, but really, really beautiful city. They have this parliament building on the Danube, which is this river that flows through the city, and it looks so, so gothic. And yeah, it's just really gorgeous. I'll show you a picture after. It's like super pretty. But there was this conference there based on like the use of ultrasound and obstetrics and gynecology and pre-med and whatever. And I didn't want to pay for food, so I ended up going to this Hungarian club because on the last day of the conference they said, "Oh, dinner is over here at this club." But the problem is I was traveling with one postdoctoral research scientist in my lab, and he was like feeling under the weather. So he's like, "Go, just go get the food." And I was like, "Shoot, like I don't have to go out and pay for dinner." But clubs aren't really my scene. So I was proud of myself because I was like, "Oh shoot, I just got to solo this Hungarian club and then try and grab some food." So I ended up going there, and yeah, it's hard because like the conference is full of clinicians and I'm just a post grad, so I don't have any clout whatsoever. But I'm forced to network with these guys and while I'm having dinner. And then I started talking about my research with this one other guy. And we were kind of butting heads a little bit because, I stand on business when it comes to what I know. And I felt like he wasn't very knowledgeable about that as a clinician. And then I asked, "Where do you work again?" And he was like, "Oh, I work at Hopkins. I run their center for blah, 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 blah." And I was
Oh
like,
wow.
that's a very prestigious university.
You're like, this guy don't know anything.
Yeah, so we were butting heads, but then I was really proud of myself in the city for doing this because, like, I'm not a huge extrovert, but I really forced myself to kind of mingle and go alone and talk to people. But he ended up offering, I said, I'm doing some more traveling in the United Kingdom and nearby for work on this work travel assignment. And he said, afterwards, here's my email. If you want to come shadow and see what I do, then you're welcome to. So I emailed him like maybe a few weeks ago saying, "Hey, I'm finally back in Seattle. Interested in maybe paying you a visit," and we have a meeting set up. So it's just
Wow.
yeah, it's a funny story. It's like, hey, I met this guy in a Hungarian club.
Across the world
Yeah,
at a club trying to get
yeah,
food. He probably
yeah, because I don't want
respected
to pay
you
for money.
for standing on business. Like he respected you because you didn't back down just because he runs an important center at John Hopkins. No, you knew what you were talking about and like, well, technically you're wrong. You're like,
Yeah, I mean,
technically.
yeah, it was a funny moment. So after that, it was less work and more leisure. So the leisure places I went to were Portugal and then Istanbul, which we talked about. Portugal is a really, really extremely beautiful kind of aesthetic country. the capital is Lisbon, which I stayed in for a few days. I stayed in a neighborhood called Fama where they have all these buildings with like orange roofs. So it's like white kind of buildings and orange roofs everywhere. It looks really pretty. They have like they're trying to copy San Francisco. I'm not sure who did it first actually. They have this Golden Gate Bridge there that makes it look like you're in San Francisco. And then after that, I went to this smaller kind of city called Porto. And Porto is really beautiful because they have these sort of even their train station, they'd have thes sort of murals called azulejo where it looks like these blue painted white tiles and they have this art like everywhere. It was really, really beautiful place. And then I'm definitely gonna see if I can take my family sometime because we stayed there kind of a few days and I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful. Food was really good. Portuguese seems like it's very hard to learn. I thought with some Spanish background it might be easy to pick up, but quite difficult. And then after that, work began. And then I would say, so I started in Newcastle and stayed there for a month. And then I went to London and stayed there for a month. Newcastle, I think you'll think is interesting because it's like more of a rural kind of college town, but the pub culture is such a big deal.
Oh
So I
my
went,
God, pub culture in the UK. There's more pubs in the
yeah,
UK than anything else. I mean, if you go to Google
yeah.
Maps right now and you search pubs in the United Kingdom, it's just going to be red. That's all it's going to be.
Yeah, and plus like football too. Like they
Oh yeah.
really love football over there. They had their so I stayed for some reason like it was cheaper to stay in a hotel than an Airbnb in Newcastle. So they stayed in the center of town in this hotel and it was right across from their stadium for Newcastle United. So every every like week or whatever when they had a home game or something, I'm not sure why they had so many games. I could hear the chanting and cheering from my room. Like it
You
was
didn't
that
go?
loud. Oh, dude, I wanted to, but it was like too late. I think
Uh,
tickets had been bought quite far in advance. But
did
that
you
was
go to any
cool. They also
matches
had,
at any other place
no,
or
I
no? You
didn't.
just heard them cheering?
No. Yeah, I just outside looking in, unfortunately. But they have a sort of different flavor of English there. They're more like countryside, I guess. So they have what's called a Geordie accent. So like for some reason I couldn't understand any of the guys if they had a really heavy Geordie accent. It was like easier for me to understand women for whatever reason. But the people we're working with, there's this one guy named Aragorn, straight from Lord of the Rings, but he was saying essentially in Newcastle they're known for mining coal.
Mm.
So a saying is that's like bringing coal to Newcastle, meaning something super redundant or unnecessary because there's so much coal over there. But because of that, they have all these strip mines. So this lad Aragorn was saying whenever he was, walking around as a kid, there were these strip mines underneath where if you fell through, you could die, and you had to be careful where you walked around. And he also said, their lakes and had a bunch of like heavy metals like mercury and lead and stuff like that, or for whatever reason. And he'd swam and was convinced that he'd gotten a lot of that in his body. So I
Oh
was
wow.
like, oh no.
So the Industrial Revolution is still going strong in the UK then.
Yeah, it seems like it's a really odd place.
Now,
Yeah.
the pub life there is probably the most important thing next to football. I mean, they go hand in hand. Did you go and experience a pub for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, I actually went on my last day there. I went with the kind of whole team I was working with over there. It was pretty funny. I mean, I got like I'm not very fond of drinking, so I just got a big thing of ale or something, or a cider or something. And yeah, it seems like they were just like, it's just a thing to
Just
do,
normal there.
after work.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
some eggs, beans on toast, blood
Oh my
sausage.
gosh. English food is bloods, literally all of that, man. You named all of it. Also, their fish and chips, they really don't like to season. They just like really kind of bland fish and chips with this stuff called mushy peas.
Mm-hmm.
Mushy peas, yeah, just mushed up peas. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
America loves golf. The UK loves pub golf. And how this works is you go to a pub and you have a certain amount of sips to down your drink. And then you go to the next pub and you do 18 pubs total. Each pub is a different type of drink. So one's beer, one's red, one's a mixed drink. So I don't know. I just thought that was
Mm.
funny because what a lot of people do is for their wedding, the bachelors go out and they do a round of pub golf. And that's
Oh
about it.
wow.
Yeah. So
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, those people are they start early too, man. They start drinking really early.
Yeah, what is it? I think Germany's 13 and the UK's 16, I would say.
Is it actually 16 in the UK?
I think so. It
I had
might
no
be
idea.
younger.
Yeah, I remember going to work early in the morning at like 8 or 9 a.m. It was a day Newcastle was playing at home, Newcastle United. So guys were walking around with beers in their hands straight up at like 9 a.m. And I was like, oh man, that is very early,
Okay, so
you know?
I just researched, and at 16 you can, if you have an adult present. It's 18,
Oh
you
wow.
can just buy it straight up.
Wow, it's very interesting. I had no idea it was that young. Wow.
So when most Americans are starting to become alcoholics at the age 21, most UK people are sobering up, or at least that's what they think they're doing. That's what they want to believe.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Henry, thank you for discussing your traveling trips with me and listening to me talk, because I know I can rant sometimes about stuff. So
No,
appreciate you
you're good.
having you on this week.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It
And
was
then
my
maybe
pleasure.
we go do a trip together.
Oh, yes, for sure. Gotta figure
I
it out.
would like to go snowboarding in Japan. I know you're a big snowboarder. Do Japan, Australia, New Zealand snowboarding trip, because my cousin snowboarded there and she said it's probably some of the most fluffiest snow you can imagine. So straight
Dude, we
powder.
got to. Yeah, we gotta visit Kai in Japan too.
And then we got to go to Ireland, and then I can give you a tour about everything that's ever happened there.
Oh my God, we should. I know London and Newcastle quite well. If we want to hang around and check things out.
And then where else can we go? We'll go to
We can go to
Iran.
Portugal.
Yeah, we'll go to Portugal.
Iran? We're not going to Iran, bro. We'll go to Portugal.
Okay, that sounds
All
fair.
right.
Big sky, small world, walking on high mountain alone. Took her to the big sky.
Thank you for tuning in to Big Sky, Small World. The music is by Alex Coulter. Please follow and leave comments on Instagram at bigsky.smallworld. Tune in next week.
Took her to the big sky.
All right, Backcountry Buzz. Friday, February 21st. Take one.